sound person, so we have to have her on board for everything. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name's Chris Seeley. I have been lucky enough to do these interviews since, I think, 2017. I come by it, honestly, I spent years on the radio as a reporter and an anchor, and now as a video producer, so I like to ask questions. And man, we could just spend a whole hour asking questions and hearing answers from this genre-bending, Grammy Award-winning, wickedly joyful mandolin-playing icon, Sam Bush.
Thank you very much.
We're so excited to hear about, I want to hear about your life, and I want to hear about your mandolin playing. We have an hour.
My life, I mean, I'm 72. How long we got?
Well, let's start at the beginning, but maybe not do I don't want to do an hour on your first 5 years, so we'll move it along, okay? Everybody here has heard him, and he knows what a joyous mandolin player. And if you haven't, we'll get some little inklings of it in the next hour. Tell us about the family that started you as a fiddle player and mandolin player.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. How you doing today? As many of you might know, I'm from outside Bowling Green, Kentucky. So that's not the coal mining country. I did not grow up in the hills of Harlan. But now Bowling Green is in south central Kentucky. It's about located really like 55 miles north of Nashville, Tennessee. So we were I'm part of a family with 5 kids, four girls and me, and but farmers. My parents were farmers, and so we grew up on a cattle farm, Hereford cattle, 330 acres, and of course, fortunately, my mother also worked at Sears and Roebuck. Because other than that, we were pretty much the Waltons out on the farm. Good night, Mary Ellen. Good night, John Boy. But looking back, it was a happy way to grow up. And but the cattle that we had, I remember my mother would come home from Sears, and then before she went to work and after she got home from work, her and my dad were milking 23 cows and. So it was. So we grew up. We ate our own beef and raised our own. But I was fortunate in that both my parents were fans of music and loved music, and my dad played the fiddle, and tinked around on the mandolin somewhat as well. My mother played guitar somewhat in the style. I would think of it as Mother Maybelle Carter style playing, where she kind of played with a thumb and that kind of strum like Mother Maybelle. So I grew up hearing Carter family tunes, and my father was a huge fan of country music, but basically a fan of fiddle playing more than anything else. And if there was a fiddle, that was the deal. But I was the one that came along and embraced bluegrass style music. My dad was, like I say, an incredible lover of country music. And of course, being from Bowling Green, we had the option, I didn't realize what an advantage it was to grow up within close proximity of the Grand Ole Opry and get to hear that music on the radio. We got very clear channel reception on WSM, the Grand Ole Opry channel, and also their, WSM TV also was who would run all these Grand Ole Opry shows, and there were quite a few of the Grand Ole Opry entertainers that would have their half-hour shows themselves that would be on Saturday afternoon, and so I can remember I became a sponge for this music. Plus, on WSM radio every morning at 5:45 a.m., Flatt and Scruggs did a 15-minute radio show. And I mean, I remember as a kid thinking, God, they got to get up every day and do this. No, Sam, it was on tape. Oh, okay. But my dad had, when transistor radios came out, he got one, and I would literally be awakened each morning with, my dad coming in, sticking that transistor radio in my ear and go, listen to Paul and Earl play this one. And so I got interested in the music, and two of my older sisters, Claire and Janet, they definitely became interested. So when the folk boom was hitting in about 62, they started singing duet versions of Peter, Paul, and Mary songs. And then within a year or two, I'd become interested and started playing mandolin with them. And but my dad bought these fiddle records by this great fiddler, and he was known as kind of the premier fiddler in country music back then. His name was Tommy Jackson. And Tommy made his own fiddle albums, square dance albums, and you could back then buy them two different ways. You could the record would be square dance record with calls, so the calls would actually be on the record, and my dad would go, I don't want them on the calls, I want to hear the music. And so I just remember my dad having these Tommy Jackson records, and specifically without calls. So on those records, there would be Tommy playing these wonderful melodies. And by the way, Tommy Jackson was like, if you've ever heard like the fiddle on old Ray Price records or what have you, that would have been Tommy Jackson. So he was just this wonderful player.
And you play along with these?
Well, I tried to play along with him, but my father actually had 78s of Tommy Jackson. And this is why, and I know many of you know this, but this is why they're called albums, because you would have 5 78 records in one package, and it was the way they made, at the time, photo albums, so people would call them record albums. So he had 78s, and he had a 78 fiddle album by Roy Acuff. And so he just loved fiddle music. And on those fiddle records, there would be a mandolin player playing along with the fiddle in unison. And I really love that sound. But the mandolin was the one that spoke to me first. So I started playing mandolin at age 11, and then I guess I picked up fiddle around age 13.
But you did fiddle national championships starting at like 14, didn't you? And you just been playing a year?
Well, I went when I was 14. I went to the contest. But that was the wildest thing to go. And we're speaking of the contest in Weiser, Idaho. And we had some friends from Kentucky that had been out there, and they told my parents, we'd like to take Sammy out with us and, let him meet the fiddlers and compete. And so I got to ride from Kentucky to Idaho. And I got to see the Rocky Mountains at age, 14. And just what an incredible variety we have of beauty in our country. And the drive yesterday from Salt Lake to here, what an incredible, beautiful variety. I wish all Americans could, if I had one wish, I just wish all Americans could see all our country like I've been fortunate to see. And I think it would change a lot of people's perspective and help us all. But anyhow, going to Weiser, Idaho, I think the common conception in Kentucky would be that everybody was born with a fiddle in their hand, right? Well, that really wasn't the case. And especially in the 60s, I think people were going through a hillbilly denial of, but not me, of course. And but getting to go to Idaho, that's what, I didn't know any other kids that played the fiddle besides me till I got to Idaho and I was competing. We're all the same age and we all play the fiddle. Bunch of geeks in one room. What a scene! And I made some friends for life. So one of the greatest things that happened in going to Weiser, Idaho that first year. So I was 14. I placed 5th. And I think that was probably charity at that, but because I was really just trying to get going. But a very inspiring event happened in that I got to meet one of my heroes in life at that moment, whose name was Byron Berline. And Byron had won that contest the year before, and but he had made that wonderful record with the Dillards called Pickin' and Fiddlin'. And that when I was a fan of the Dillards already. And then their next record comes out, and it's a fiddle album by a guy named Byron Berline. And the way he played was, and Byron too had listened to Tommy Jackson, but he was also very influenced by the great fiddlers from Texas and brought the Texas fiddle style into a sort of a Southern mentality of the way Southerners play. And hearing Byron Berline, that actually turned me on to want to play the fiddle more. And so getting to meet Byron at that festival and befriending him, and this is 1965, I guess. Yeah. And Byron was so nice to me, and we became pen pals, and he would write me letters of encouragement and tell me things I should listen to and work on, so
then you're playing fiddle and mandolin.
now playing fiddle and mandolin, and in the bluegrass bands I would be in as a kid. I mean, I was just a sponge for all kinds of music. I just loved it all, and like the rock radio, for instance, in the '60s, things weren't in categories or boxes, the way we have certain categories of music now, and that's good that there is. But back then, you could hear. Okay, so one moment I'd hear on the radio in Bowling Green, Kentucky. You'd hear James Brown. The Singing Nun might follow James Brown. Strawberry Alarm Clock, Jefferson Airplane, the Box Tops, of course the Beatles, of course the Stones, and then or like classical Gas by Mason Williams was like this incredible hit that sounded to me like, holy moly, play that at my funeral. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life. And so it was really, I was just a sponge. So I'd be the youngest guy in the bluegrass band by far, either on mandolin, usually on mandolin or fiddle. And then I loved rock and roll and got turned on to that. And so I either played guitar or electric bass in rock bands. And I'd be the oldest guy in that band, and maybe the only one with a driver's license. And so that was, so I was always, and at the same time trying to learn more. And in the school stage band orchestra, I played upright bass and with the bow, very serious. Took bass lessons for 2 years, and everybody laughed at me because I'd be the kid that carried the bass home that night, practiced, everybody, certain friends would just wait to laugh at me carrying that bass in school every morning. So I was just, a sponge for that for music.
So it was not, from the beginning, it wasn't traditional fiddle music, traditional bluegrass music. You're like the Grateful Dead.
Well, yeah, I was buying I bought, Jefferson Airplane records from Dead, but also, I feel like it was a very fortunate situation that, I watched, on Sunday nights, I watched the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. I got to see the Stones and the Beatles and the Airplane and Hendrix, and so it was just opening up a wide world, because all of a sudden the Jefferson Airplane would do a tune where Yorma, the guitar player, was finger picking. I went, well, wait a minute, he knows all about finger picking and folk style and stuff. But I did like country music as well, but I just didn't. What spoke to me the most was. And that being said, in liking country music, I played in a hell of a lot of Saturday night square dance bands, and I was the snare drummer in that one till I graduated to fiddle. I think square dancing that's where I learned to enjoy playing long tunes. The dancers like to go for like 15 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And
my dad was a caller. I remember that.
Yeah. And so we got used to playing these long tunes, and. But I just noticed, even back then, I noticed that the square dancers, they didn't necessarily enjoy the fanciest fiddler. They enjoyed the fiddler with the best timing that they could dance to.
Yeah.
So that.
Do you remember? What do you remember from those days that you could show us that is so different from what you do now?
Well, but of course, I started out playing traditional style, and it is on. Well, here would have been one of the first tunes I learned from a Tommy Jackson thing, and later, lo and behold, I'm in the studio with Tony Rice in 1977. He goes, "Hey, you know Stony Point?" And I said,
"Matter of fact,
it's one of the first tunes I ever learned." So this would be like Tommy Jackson's version of Stony Point. Sorry. Let's do it again.
in reading about you, Sam, a lot of things, it struck me there were a lot of road not taken moments in your life. Would you talk about the Roy Acuff road not taken?
Yes, I guess so. When a slight bit of back to that is, so my father, as I would mention, was just, his music that he loved would, for instance, would be Roy Acuff. Acuff was his guy, and Hank Williams. And I remember one of the few times I ever saw him shed a tear was he picked me up from school, and his eyes were watering, and he told me, he said, "There's been a plane crash. Patsy Cline, Cowboy Copas, and Hawkshaw Hawkins died." And Patsy Cline was his total favorite singer in life. And Hawkshaw Hawkins and Cowboy Copas were his male singers he loved. He loved Porter Wagoner as well, but and he just couldn't believe it. They just wiped out country music, and but at any rate, sorry, but to get to that, I think then he really started paying more attention to Roy Acuff. He really loved Acuff, and which featured the best fiddle player in country music, Howdy Forster. And so I guess I had been to Weezer that first year and placed fifth. So we had befriended a guy that played fiddle with Hank Williams. His name was Jerry Rivers, and Jerry invited us down to be able to just come down to the Grand Ole Opry, and I'll get you guys backstage. Okay, so this is, here I am, 14, heck yeah. So here we go. So we go down to Grand Ole Opry, and at that time, Roy Acuff probably owned like this one block of Broadway in Nashville. Now the tourist block where, Bridezillas go and everything. That's where, and we have pedal taverns in Nashville. That's really great when you're in a hurry trying to drive around town and you're behind a pedal tavern. 18 people drunk out of their minds pedaling on a wagon. Never mind. But anyhow, Roy Acuff owned a place called the Acuff Roy Acuff Museum and Exhibit Hall. So we wanted to go in the Roy. It was about 4 p.m, and we get down there way early. Yeah, we're having a big time, looking around Nashville, and there's the Ryman Auditorium right there. And so we go in the Acuff Museum, and lo and behold, sitting there taking admission is Roy's right-hand man, bashful brother Oswald, his dobro player and banjo player. And Oswald was a very friendly guy, and my father was a very friendly man. So the two of them got to talking, and they get to going, and now my stage dad that embarrassed me all the time going, my boy is a championship fiddler, and which I wasn't. And but at any rate, so Oswald went back. I mean, the exhibit had lots of instruments in it, and just all the things Acuff had collected over years. And didn't have room in his house anymore, so he started the museum. And anyway, Oswald went and got a fiddle, and I played a tune, and there was a phone at the front desk, and Oswald dials the phone, and he just goes, "Roy, you better get down here. We got a boy that can fiddle." and within 30 minutes, in walked Mr. Acuff, and most everybody called him Mr. Roy. And so Mr. Roy came in, and so I played some more for him. Now lo and behold, now we're backstage at the Grand Ole Opry with the king of country music, the guy that can do any damn thing he wants. He's the only person there that could do whatever he wanted on the Opry. And later that night, so after the Grand Ole Opry, each night there at midnight, there would be an hour-long show broadcast on WSM from literally, just on Broadway at the Ernest Tubb Record Shop. It was the world famous Ernest Tubb Record Shop show. So Acuff happened to be on the Ernest Tubb Record Shop that night, he and his band. So I played a tune on that night with Ernest on the Ernest Tubb Record Shop with the Acuff band. So we, over the years, now all throughout my high school, either on a Friday or Saturday, almost every week, we'd go to Nashville, and I'd be in this jam session in Roy Acuff's dressing room, and it was a fiddle jam session, fiddle, 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 fiddle. And so the long and the short of it is, I now turned 18, and Acuff, he didn't actually call me, he called my dad. And he said, I want Sammy to join my road band. And Howdy, his great fiddler, didn't want to be on the road anymore, so Howdy, he said, we want Sammy to go with us and play on the road. Well, their first trip was to Vietnam. And that's 1970, and I'm 18 years old, and I'm scared to death of being drafted as it is, and the thought of being anywhere in Vietnam was pretty scary to me. Not only that, Hank Snow had just been there 3 weeks before this job offer occurred, and the hotel that Hank Snow checked out of, wherever town they were in within Vietnam, the story was that 18 minutes after he checked out, it was leveled. It was bombed and gone. So I realized, there's no front line. And but at any rate, the bottom line is, I didn't entertain the notion of playing with Mr. Acuff for very long at all, because I was 18 years old, I was headstrong. I wanted to play either bluegrass or rock and roll, and I did not want to play the music of people that were my father's age. I mean, it was just really, the music just didn't, it was the music. I wasn't that interested in playing country music with Acuff.
You said no to Roy Acuff.
I did, and of course, yes, look, hindsight, I said no to the most powerful man in Nashville, Tennessee. I mean, and I didn't, but it wasn't much of a thought pattern. And then within no time, and I was working up at the Holiday Inn in Bowling Green. I was about to register to go to college. I had in my senior year of high school, I decided I didn't know enough about the instrument of the fiddle. It's like I don't understand the whole neck. I understand fiddle tunes. So I went to a professor named Betty Pease, and Mrs. Pease gave me a year of violin lessons, and that was the great humbler, to go from 3-time national junior fiddle champ to beginning violin student. And in book 1, just like the 6-year-olds play, and it was, I mean, I could have gone on and been a pretty mediocre violinist, perhaps. But one of the great things she did was she gave me her 10-page college rhythm course. And the rhythm course, I think, that I got from her was the most, I mean, yes, I still hold the bow like a violin player, but I hold the fiddle like a fiddler. It's kind of a different thing. And, but her rhythm course, it was the way to learning to read the notes in time against time. In other words, there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, and so you're singing these notes, and it's like how to make 3 go against 4. Da, 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 to understand those type of things. So that was, Miss P's rhythm course really did it. But so I was about to register for college, and I was going to try to play violin, and these 2 guys came down from Louisville. They played in the band called the Bluegrass Alliance, and asked me if I wanted to move to Louisville. Oh yeah, and I had just the day before turned the corner too fast with the dishes, and I broke about 275 dishes, and that wiped out my $55 a week paycheck pretty much. And so I'm like,
Another road not taken.
This may not wait me for. But anyway, they came down and I said, you want to move up to Louisville and play guitar 5 nights a week? And I went, yep. I'm your boy.
Why not?
So I went to Louisville and joined the band, the Bluegrass Alliance, on guitar. And then within a couple of months, I met Tony Rice in Reedsville, North Carolina. And he was 19, I was 18, and we hit it off. I said, hey man, if you come join this band, I can, because he'd seen me play the mandolin, and we played a little bit. If you come join, I get to go back to mandolin, and we have a much better guitar player. How about that? And so that's how that occurred. But really, I didn't. And then there were a couple years later, I had another couple of job offers that I didn't take. That would, the road. One was to join the John Hartford Aereo playing band, and which loved them. I loved them unconditionally. But we had started our Newgrass Revival band, and we'd only been going about 8 months, and I was so in love with my brothers in the band, I couldn't leave.
So tell me what was so different about Newgrass Revival?
Well, we were, at the time there was there already was a progressive kind of bluegrass. I mean, I grew up admiring the people who had already deviated from the traditions of Bill Monroe, or the way, I mean, when you look at bluegrass, I mean, I got to go to the first Bluegrass Festival in 1965 in Roanoke, Virginia. And on this festival, it became apparent to me, or I didn't realize it, but on the festival, it was like the Stanley Brothers. They were the Stanley Brothers. Don Reed on his band, Red Smiley and his band, the Osborne Brothers, Jim and Jesse, of course, Bill Monroe. Buck White was there with a band, Doc Watson. And so I was already listening to the groups that had kind of made their own way. But by saying that, I now realize at that Roanoke Bluegrass Festival on a Sunday afternoon, they had what they called the Bluegrass Story. And they literally went through the fact that almost all the bands there, they had all played with Bill Monroe at one point. And then you go off and you took what you got from Monroe and made your own. No one more so than Flatt and Scruggs did, probably. But Jimmy Martin was there. Jimmy played with him. Clyde Moody was there. He played with him. Mac Wiseman, he was there. He played with him. So they did all these. It was, for me, the 13-year-old in the audience, the history of these songs, and it was like I came away from there going, whoa, I didn't know all that. So I started being turned on by the Osborne Brothers, especially Jim and Jesse, the Dillards. Loved the Dillards so much. And then the second year, the Country Gentlemen came, and they blew the lid off the place because they had fun showmanship while doing the bluegrass. They weren't just stoically standing there. So, at any rate, with our Newgrass Revival band, or just me in general, I was always influenced by that. There's a wonderful record that was made in the 60s by a band in the Northeast called the Charles River Valley Boys, and it's called Beetle Country. And I urge you to check it out. It was produced by Paul Rothchild, the Doors producer, and he produced the Dillards' first album, by the way. And but he loved bluegrass, and it was his idea, let's get some bluegrass guys to do Beatles songs. And it's a really great record. It might sound a little dated now, but I was really influenced by all this new bluegrass. So when we started our band Newgrass Revival, we were really, even by that name, we were just kind of trying. Now, granted, at the time there was trends to all, and I think there still may be. There's trends within bluegrass to try to have a clever name and use the word grass or some derivative of it, So, but in Newgrass, the Bluegrass Alliance had called one of their albums Newgrass, and that kind of made sense. It was a new kind of way to play it. But in calling it Newgrass Revival, and maybe and surely we got the word revival from Creedence, we realized that we were just trying to carry on with this newer kind of bluegrass that turned us on so much.
And you took some grief for it, right, from the traditionalists?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, yes. I mean, they... Well, and not only that, but we didn't think anything about it. I mean, I was, college age then, right? I just wasn't in college, and everybody else was maybe 7 or 8 years, or 7, 8, 10 years older than me in the band. But I mean, just little things like not dressing alike anymore on stage, because it just got to a point where we went, why do we even go through that? I mean, because you go to see the Allman Brothers, they don't have outfits.
Right.
Paul Revere and the Raiders, they had outfits. And but rock and roll had already way deviated. Once after the Beatles and once the Stones hit,
yeah.
And it was like, oh, you don't have to dress alike. Stones don't dress alike, and And so, but I mean, just a simple thing like not dressing alike and growing hair.
Yeah, your
growing
hair was
long.
longer. You were the hippies.
We kind of were. I mean, but we were part of a group of different. There were a few bands like, you know, there was a band from North Carolina called the New Deal String Band. They were the first hippie bluegrass band I met when I was 17, and man, we just became pals, and I'm pals with them to this day. But yeah, I mean, it became obvious that you didn't, you know, have to have short hair to play bluegrass, and but we weren't being radical. We just looked like the other people our age at that time. So we were just radical within a traditional format, I guess. And so the other musicians always treated us great. There was never weirdness from other musicians. It was not like that at all. We were friends with Ralph Stanley. We were friends, and the Country Gentlemen treated us great. I can think of one person that didn't want me to even fill in for. Alan Mundy called me once. He said he was playing with Jimmy Martin, and he says, "Hey, we don't have a mandolin player Saturday night. Are you working?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, let me call Jimmy. See if you want." I said, "I'd love to, man. That'd be great." And here was back there. And Alan called me back within 5 minutes, laughing, saying, "I told Jimmy you're available and you want to play the show." And Jimmy said, "I'd rather not have a mandolin player and have that long-haired son of a." and they did play without a mandolin player.
Now, I read somewhere that the state of Kentucky said you were the father of newgrass. But
it is the one, the way I understand it, it is the one thing the Kentucky State legislative floor voted on that year, that it was the only thing that had a unanimous vote.
But it's like you dispute that paternity test. You say it was already happening before you guys did it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice thing to say, and you know, the father. I mean, you can directly trace. You know, bluegrass is pretty unique to me in that you can. I don't know if there's other forms of music where you can trace the origins so much back to one person that started this group. Many people would argue, well, that's true, but without Earl Scruggs, there's no bluegrass.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that too. But Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys when Earl Scruggs was not with him yet, and String Bean was the first banjo player in Bill's band.
I went on Facebook and I asked I have a bunch of friends that I know that play mandolin, and I asked, what are your questions for Sam Bush? So here's a couple of them. What's the instrument in your house that stays out and you play anytime, all the time? What's your one you always reach for?
Well, I've actually learned you need to keep them in the case the hard way.
Humidifiers.
Busting one. It wasn't in the case. I have a 67 D28 Martin guitar it belonged to one of my best friends in life, and I wanted that guitar for 50 years, and he finally sold it to me. And so that one kind of got me through 2020, I think. Actually, I have a beautiful mandolin. If you've ever seen the Homer and Jethro album covers where Jethro's holding this beautiful red round hole mandolin, I own that one. And I'm not well versed in playing round hole mandolins. I grew up, you know, they're more jazzy instruments, or the way Jethro played it was. But that, and I have a Fender Telecaster that sits over on a stand.
Wow.
That one I can play while I watch TV, and I don't bother anyone. But I love to watch baseball. So as I watch baseball, I sit and just practice with finger exercises a lot. And
I was going to ask if you practiced. I mean, you're such. Do you need to practice? I'm being only.
I think as the hands age, you
semi-facetious.
find yourself needing to practice more than ever, because I have arthritis in my hands, and 50 years of, or however long I've been doing this, beating on it takes their toll. But practicing, and I've never, I wasn't a meticulous practicer through my life, but we played so much that's kind of its own practice, and it's because, sure. And I also found that when I'm sitting around, when I know if we haven't been playing much lately, and I got there's a good show coming up that I want to make sure I'm sharp, back in my sharp zone. That's when I will put on like headphones, where I'm not really hearing this very much, because just sitting around and playing, they're different. They're kind of like different muscles than if I'm standing up and we're playing, I'm singing, we're having fun, but sitting, that's a different set of muscles. So if I'm really trying to get tough again, I put on the Strength in Numbers CD on headphones, of which, and just. So I just start, and I'm not hearing myself that much. So in that way, and I make myself stand up and play too.
Oh, that's good, because it's so different.
It is.
Is there a Strength in Numbers CD? I'm sorry that I'm a dope and I don't know the answer to that question.
There is.
Jerry Douglas, Bela, Mark O'Connor, Edgar Meyer, and you. Wow, that Strength in Numbers is a really appropriate name for you guys.
It became our name. We were originally, at first they called us the Telluride All-Stars. We kind of started doing that. But Edgar was the one that put that quintet together for one of his first album. But they called us the Telluride All-Stars, and then we said, well, and then some of the other people on the festival would go, well, why are they the All-Stars?
You've done 50.
I didn't name us there.
You've done 50 Tellurides yourself.
Yeah, I did.
So you're the, what do they call you? The father, the daddy, the king? The king, sorry.
Again, I've never named myself any of these things. And it's neat, it's flattering, and but with the Telluride, but with our band Strength in Numbers, so then we decided, okay, let's call our band Telluride. Okay, great. That makes sense. So we're actually in the studio working on this record for MCA Records, and all of a sudden, someone's attorney contacted us. Another group not from Colorado, like us, not from Colorado, already apparently had copyrighted. They're from Alabama, I think even. Excuse me, and they calling themselves Telluride. And they said, but we'll let you guys have the name for a mere $40,000.
Is that all?
And we had already decided the album title should be Strength in Numbers. Mm-hmm. So we said,
that was an easy.
Let's just call ourselves Strength in Numbers.
Here's
you guys keep your 40 grand.
Yeah. Here's another mandolin player question and I just want to say it's not my question because you're probably not going to like it. Who's your favorite mandolin player?
Oh, golly. Well, favorites in life, that first of all, like Bill Monroe is still, the main hero for me in bluegrass music. But I had two favorites in life, and my two ultimate favorites were Bill Monroe and Jethro Burns, who are nothing alike, and it's totally different in everything. Around their, they were around the same age. And Jethro, for the jazz that he brought to the instrument like no one else before or since. Bill for what he did. People asked me one time, who do you think is, anybody ever play blues on the mandolin? I said, hell yes, Bill Monroe. Yeah. Bill Monroe's the best blues mandolin player, because his music was a marriage for me of blues, rural blues, and fiddle music. It was like this perfect marriage of blues and fiddle. Now, currently, as we speak right now, who's my favorite mandolin player? I'm so fortunate to, still be living and to have heard all these great mandolin players. There's so many wonderful, wonderful players now that the bar is set so high. The first two favorites I can think of right now would be Chris Thiele and Sierra Hull. And but that being said, I mean, I hesitate to start naming because I've got a lot of. I've always tended to band up and love to be with the mandolin pickers, you know. And I mean, there's just so many great players in so many styles. You want to hear somebody play some incredible Bill Monroe stuff? Go listen to Mike Compton. I mean, you know, you got Matt Flinner, you got Drew Emmett, Dominic Leslie with Molly Tuttle is wonderful. Jared with Billy Strings is a great player. I mean, there was just so, Jacob Jolliffe. Wow. There's a Casey Campbell, a friend of mine in Nashville, really wonderful player. I mean, there's just, and again, I hesitate to say because, you know, oh, hell, you want to talk about great bluegrass? Ronnie McCurry.
Yeah.
You know, one of the main.
All right, I just looked at the clock and I'm having a stroke because we only have 15 minutes left. So just kind of lightning round.
Lightning round.
Lightning round. What are you most proud of?
Being married to Lynn for 40 years.
What do you do for fun?
Watch baseball.
What's the longest you can go without sitting with an instrument in your lap? What's the longest you've ever gone?
Oh, well, there's been times where I haven't picked it up for a while, but that was probably due to a health slip, which I've had documented. Yes, I've had health slips in my life, and cancer a couple times, and what have you. And so, you know, yeah, there'd be time. That probably in '82 when I was, you know, through a chemotherapy period where you just, you know, you would think to yourself, oh, I'll watch TV, I'll read a book, I'll practice my mandolin. You know, you don't really feel like doing that at the time. So, you know, I don't know, a few weeks at time, but no, there's always, again, for me, I said, well, you know, it's keeping a good callus pad going, and even okay. So even though and as I practice, if you want something to work on your calluses, as I practice, okay. So I'll be playing along, watching say a baseball game, play a little TV, or something, and during the commercials, I go, I wonder how long this commercial is. Well, let's just do this. Do that for about, do that till you see a little piece of skin come up. or in a way of practicing for callus one thing though really a good callus builder is little pull-offs. Because I like to be able to hear, I want you to hear that. I want that lick to be as loud as the picked one. So actually, my action might be just a tink higher at the first fret, because I want to be able to do it there too. That one's not easy. You can see pieces of skin fly off.
What's your favorite song to play right now in your set, in the current set with your fellows? Because you've been sitting there with a mandolin all this time, and we need to hear another song, don't you think?
We could. Yeah. Oh, probably Circles Around Me is one that means a lot to me.
Do you mind playing it, or a part of it, or do you rather play that with the band and
I'm
we'll
not
all
there
see
yet.
it at 3 o'clock?
I'm not there vocally yet.
It is. Okay, no problem.
Well, okay, I'll do one. Somebody said recently, as a mandolin player, you spend half your life trying to tune the thing, and the other half playing out of tune. And I swear.
What's that A string?
Whoever invented this double string thing. Okay, well, let's, all right. Actually, this is one of my favorite tunes to play. when Lynn and I met, one of the first things we, as we talked about music, and we realized we both love Bob Dylan, and that Dylan is like this constant in my life. And just the other day, I was just saying, God, I'm so glad we still got Bob Dylan, because somebody still gets to be that weird.
Have you heard his Christmas album?
Oh yeah,
Oh.
I have
That's weird.
everything. You want to come to the person's house that may have every Bob Dylan thing.
Okay, it's
I mean, I'm wearing my Tangled Up in Blue shirt.
there you go.
If you ever find yourself in Tulsa, Oklahoma, go to the Bob Dylan Center. It's really inspirational. It really is. Because you would think, he just writes in a stream of consciousness, right? Well, it shows his writing pattern. He wrote the song Joker Man, and there are 11 different versions of that song where you see. It's just like,
Wow, no idea.
not only was he the most gifted songwriter ever, he was the most dedicated to his art. So at any rate, me being from Bowling Green, down south, well, Lynn, she's from way up north, Louisville, and so this is our song.
If you're traveling in the North Country Fair, where the winds blow heavy on the borderline, remember me to the one who lives there. She once was a true love of mine. If you're going where the snowflakes storms, or where the rivers freeze and the summer ends, see, for me she has a coat so warm to keep her from the highland winds. Please see if her hair hangs so long, blows and flows all around her breast. See, for me if her hair hangs long. That's the way I remember her best. I'm a-wondering if she remembers me at all. Many times I've often prayed in the darkness of my night, in the brightness of my day. So if you're traveling in the North Country Fair, where the winds blow heavy on the borderline. Remember me to the one who lives there. She once was a true love of mine, a love of mine, true love of mine.
And by the way, that little Dickie Betts quote at the end, that's our daughter's Jessica.
Oh, okay. So I think we have time for a couple more things. One is, I'm sure we'll all be there at 3 today when you're playing at the ball field.
I hope to be.
Yeah. So just between us, what do you do right before you go on stage, or in the 10 or 15 minutes before you go on stage? You have some kind of routine, mantra, something or other. If you don't, I'm going to be so bummed.
It's not. It doesn't happen every time, but there's. I don't know if I've ever said this. John Hartford taught me something a long time ago, and it was after the first time I went through a cancer thing. Hartford had already been going through his, and so I had some friends, I had some coaches to help me get through this, and John said, he told me something he would do sometimes and before going on, and it's not a prayer, it's not a chant, it's not a, but just to have a couple of moments to yourself, just to close your eyes and just go. Not any one particular phrase, but just something on the effect of, I'm going to go on and enjoy playing my instruments, and I know I can't always hit what I want to, but I sure enjoy the pursuit, and I'm going to go and do what brings me great joy, and let's go give it our best.
Joy is so much the part of the definition of people that I've talked to about you, that you're joyful playing. So that's in there in your bones. What is it about the music?
Well, what it is about music, it's indescribable because it's a feeling, and it is a feeling as I play, and I've always been fortunate that, when it's time to play, obviously sometimes you might just, you can't play well, or you don't feel, you haven't rested or what have you. But I'm very fortunate that when it's time to play, my mind just goes to the music in the moment that I'm in. And that, of course, revolves around the joy of playing with others, for me. I had to play a couple of solo shows during pandemic, or not in 2020, but in 2021, one weekend we found we had these two major festivals, and everybody in the band had COVID except me. So we called the people putting on the shows, goes, do you still want me by myself? They go, yeah, sure. Well, I'm not a solo performer, and because I love to play rhythm. I feel like one of the things I can bring to the group that I feel good about is that when I'm playing rhythm for you, I'm hoping that it helps you play better. That's, you know, and so that's the joyful part for me. And but hello, my phone actually does this. I played it. Somebody said, "Wow, is that you?" I said, "Oh yeah, I make royalties every time one of those goes off." Really? No.
What makes your chops different from other people's chops?
The rhythm chop we're talking about, and of course, it got started by Bill Monroe, and I've often wondered if he just let his action get so high he couldn't press the strings down at one point. But because, okay, if you're not, the chop is made by releasing, for me, kind of releasing the chord as you hit it with the pick. But you got enough of it in there that you know the definition of the chord. But this started with Bill Monroe. I mean, because, okay, a standard strum would be, if you're not chopping it, that's what it is. It's a guitar strum. But if you're chopping it and you're cutting it off, and this probably also came from F-hole guitar players, jazz guitarists. So my right hand hasn't changed. And that's kind of the Bill Monroe kind of did it, where you kind of hear.
And a Sam Bush chop?
Well, mine's, it comes from that. I think one of the persons that had the chop I loved the most was John Duffy. Had this wonderful chop that just defined the backbeat of their band. But also my chopping, and I've got different ways to do it, is that the first time I heard Bob Marley and the Wailers, what attracted me right off was the guitar rhythm. And through, being a high school, I played drums in the marching band too. And no, I played drum in the marching band, not a kid. But I had to learn certain rudiments, had to learn certain things. And so in that, once I heard Bob Marley, then I realized, well, then that can be kind of like a little drum kit. That kind of chop is the same as went on a snare drum, the same thing. So that kind of chop is done by sort of dampening the strings with the sides of my fingers. Otherwise, it'd be this. Which, by the way, that's my favorite chord on the mandolin, A, power chord. That's your Led Zeppelin. Yeah, you can play Bitch by the Stones. Sorry.
So we will be all there at 3 o'clock to hear you play chops and all kinds of other things. We so appreciate you taking an hour to be with us today. That's awesome.
We'll be there.
Everything I need, 'cause I got you.